Hello, I'm Kerry from Suntrap. We're going to take a walk today in Epping Forest because we're just at the turn of the seasons and autumn is just starting to happen. Collecting any berries or fruit from Epping Forest is illegal. There are so many visitors to the forest that if each person just took a few, then there'd be very little left. This year, it's likely that more than 14 million people will visit the forest, and this fruit is needed for the wildlife that lives here. So these are the sloe berries, a form of wild plum with one stone in the centre. And if you go across, we'll see. Then we've got this here is ivy, and these flowers are the last source of nectar for bees before they sort of go into a cold winter. You leave them plenty of stores to see them through the winter. Next we've got these red ones. These are haw-berries and a hawthorn bush. Again with just one stone in the middle. And berries have this bright colour so that animals and birds can see them and collect them, eat them, and then of course the seeds are spread through the forest. And next to each of these we've then got an oak tree, and on the oak tree we've got the classic acorns there growing, and as you know they'll be a great source of food for squirrels, but also a bird called a jay which also collects acorns and buries them in the same way that squirrels bury them, and lots of oak trees spread by squirrels and jays burying the seeds and then not finding them again. And behind us we've got a number of younger oak trees which I'm sure will have been spread that way.
So a really common sight in Epping Forest at this time of year will be these bright red berries which are growing on one of the most common trees in Epping Forest, which is holly. It's one of the only evergreen trees in Epping Forest, which means that its leaves are green all year round. And it's really important for this reason, as it's a really good year-round food crop for lots of animals. And being that it is a food crop, it's got these specially adapted leaves to limit how much they get eaten, and that's with these sort of spikes on the edges. So this is the other evergreen tree in Epping Forest that you would spot, especially in autumn and winter, because they do stand out. And this is a yew tree. Now, it's really identifiable because its leaves are these very small, thin, needle-like leaves. And at this time of year, you may spot these very distinctive red berries on them. They're incredibly poisonous.
In this part of Hillwood, the hornbeam is usually the first trees to start to lose their leaves, and you'll often end up with a yellow ring of leaves on the floor underneath one of these hornbeams. And once they've lost their leaves, they're pretty easy to identify. They've got this grey sort of wavy pattern to their trunk.
And it doesn't have berries or nuts on it. The seeds grow in these little groups, catkins, and each seed, if I pull one off, sits in its own little pair of wings, tiny little seed in the middle and a pair of wings on each side. It's a little early in the season, but in early October, if you come into the forest on a windy day, you have great fun as these spin down from the trees trying to catch them before they hit the ground. And you'll see masses and masses of them coming off the trees, and the hope that one or two of them will grow into a new generation of trees. Let's see if this one spins. Yeah, there we go.
One of the things to look out for as you go through the forest in autumn is fungi. There's so much to be found, especially if you look on old, dead pieces of wood, as you see on these ones here. Just remember, please don't pick any of them in Epping Forest. They're really important to the ecosystem to help break down this old rotten wood.
So this is a type of bracket fungus growing on this standing deadwood. This is birch that it's growing on, silver birch. And we think this bracket fungus is called birch polypore. It's known to have medicinal properties, so it's antibacterial, antimicrobial, and even used to treat some parasites. Certain parts are used for different things, so some parts were used for sort of dressing wounds, and other parts were actually used as a razor strop, so barbers would have used them to sharpen their razors.
Here's one of the big old beech trees of the forest. Fantastic in the early autumn sunshine. If we go a bit closer, there's something interesting growing in amongst the roots. This one may be called chicken of the woods, and although it is edible, of course we wouldn't pick it because picking fungi in Epping Forest is completely illegal. Here's some more hiding in amongst the roots, just starting to grow now. Several weeks later, this is what chicken of the woods looks like once the fruiting bodies have opened up to release their spores. Much flatter, the spores will be coming out from underneath each of these layers of mushrooms. Here we're looking at one of the old pollarded beech trees in Epping Forest. Huge now after it's not been cut for well over 100 years. Pollarding was the process of cutting trees and then branches regrowing and then the local people coming and harvesting that wood. But in the forest, trees have not been recut, lopped, for well over 100 years. And here we see what can happen to the beech trees as their branches get top heavy, they can come down. On the other hand, it does make for a great habitat where the trees have not been cut. The wood can become quite rotten, and just like many other trees, this one has got some fungus growing down amongst its roots. Then if we look right up the trunk again, follow it up, there's some more fungus, bracket fungus, growing on the trunk. So we walked part of the way down the hill now, come to an area of huge, great, old beech pollards, and this one, as you can see, has been a victim of a windy day and is now lying on its side. Many people think that trees have huge roots going really deep into the ground and spreading out massively around the tree. In fact, beech trees are quite shallow rooted, as you can see here. And if in addition to their shallow roots they have branches which are top heavy, it does make them very prone to being blown over. So we're now looking at the tangle of branches from the tree that we've just seen fallen over. And just like every other dead tree in the forest, it won't be here forever, and that's partly because of the job that the fungus growing on it now is doing, helping to rot it down and add all those nutrients back into the soil. Another sure sign that autumn is well on its way is that the bracken is beginning to die back. And this patch here will completely die, and then a new lot of bracken grow next summer. And just in 1 year, sometimes and it can get over 6 feet tall. Incredibly quick growing plant. These little round fungi growing on this old piece of wood are puffballs. And every mushroom that you see is the fruiting body of a much larger organism that's growing inside the dead wood or the old rotting leaves. And these are a way for the fungus to spread its spores. With the puffball, what happens is raindrops fall on the side of the little ball and the spores puff out of the top. And we're going to have a go at seeing if we can artificially get this one to show us what happens by just gently giving a little squeeze. I'm not sure whether you're seeing any of the spores coming out. Perhaps you can. One more go. There we go. You might just see the spores coming out of the top there. That's how the puffball spreads through the forest.
So this is one of the most recognisable trees you'll find in Epping Forest. This is an oak tree. You can identify this by its really rough bark with these really deep fissures, and if you're around one while it still has its leaves on, they're really recognisable. Growing on this tree we have another fungus, which is known as beefsteak fungus, because it looks like a steak supposedly, and it does, I don't know if you can see, but it does ooze a red liquid that looks a bit like blood.
We've walked about halfway down the hill now towards Suntrap, and in this section of Hillwood is an area of silver birch trees, which are these thin silvery trunked trees. And in autumn, where there are silver birch trees, you can look out for possibly the most iconic mushroom toadstool of them all, this red one with white dots, the fly agaric. Lots of mushrooms are associated with particular trees, and the fly agaric is associated with silver birch. And they don't just help to rot down all the dead material in the forest. Fungi have a really close relationship with trees. Under the ground, they have hundreds of thousands of tiny little hairs called mycelium, and these help the trees, and they intertwine with the roots of the trees and help the trees to collect water, and then water is exchanged with the tree roots for sugars. So the fungus gets sugar, the tree gets nutrients and water, and so both are benefiting from this relationship known as a symbiotic relationship.